Welcome to the Victoria Rumble Room, the show that digs deep into issues in Victoria, Vancouver Island, and even further afield. I'm Robin Adair, and across town in his padded broom closet is my partner in crime, Jolton John Jurisic, also known as the Croatian Sensation. Hi, John.
You know, brilliant, freaking brilliant. I mean, every session I go, well, I'm going to come up with these words to describe Robin, and every session I don't. And every session you come with better ones. Jolting John Jurisic. Oh, okay, I'm getting shirts. I say that and I never do, but I'm going to. This week, we're going to be talking about an issue that I think is mission critical, for the community. And that's around culture and specifically around the battle of the school bands in School District 61. Red hot topic. We see the kids on the street. Some programs are coming back. Some money is being allocated back. Others face the chopping block. Red hot issue. I cannot wait to dig into this. But first, let's rumble on a couple of short snappers. Okay? And something extremely topical, as is the topic we're actually dealing with today. But I understand you had a little chat with old-time friend of yours that we've had on the show already, that being Victoria Councillor Steve Andrews. How are things going in the city parks?
Well, thank you for asking, John. Stephen Andrew, I did indeed have a chance to speak to the councillor, and he was able to give me kind of an update on the parks. And I also have another updated report from our man on the ground in James Bay. We call him Paul the Scoop. He's a reporter that has gone down to where the tents are and seen what is going on and what tents are gone and what remain. He reports 15 to 20 fewer tents in Beacon Hill Park. A few have now moved to the sports field, but he thinks overall the numbers are certainly down. There are only a couple of tents left now in the area left of the sports field, and 10 days ago there were 13 or 14 of those tents. So that's sort of hot off the press, and it's good to hear that we've spent $126 million, the province has, on new accommodation, and people that are looking for a place to go outside of a tent are going there, and that's the way it really needs to be. Stephen Andrews says people need to be patient. I asked how long it'll take to get all of the campers out of the park, and he is cautiously optimistic they will all be out by the end of the month. However, the caveat, there are activists, there are people that are trying to make a political point and grandstand. They have tents down there too. They are not homeless, they are political, and it may take longer to move them out, may take court injunctions, who knows? We'll see what happens. Stephen says the big thing, and this is the whole city council, but particularly Mayor Lisa Helps and the councillors that really have been behind moving these folks into new accommodation, including, I believe, 30 are being moved to the small home area, which is just over by Royal Athletic Park. But the big objective is for this to be done safely. So let's make sure that happens.
Wonderful summary. Thank you, Stephen. Through Robin. I applaud this stage. It's obviously a necessary stage. What's happened, however, is that the temperatures, the emotional temperature around this is so high that the really objective and safe and humane way that this is being done won't be taken that way. It won't be interpreted that way. People want these folks out of the parks. They want them clean, and they want this issue to go away. And so, yes, Stephen, you're right. Let's all be calm and safe. But I doubt many will feel that way. They want them out today. They wanted them out yesterday. They wanted them out 3 months ago. Let's see how this goes.
I'll cross our fingers. John, I look at some of the other issues. Saanich, your backyard, looks like they've made a decision on casinos.
Oh, man, how long have they studied this casino issue? What, 2 years? I don't understand.
They've said no. They've said no.
They said no. And
they're not going to take the gamble, John.
They're not going to take the gamble. I wish I had something around dice or something.
They think it's a bunch of craps.
That's great, Robin. Look, economic development is hard. It's going to be hard. Generating revenue and services to pay for an expensive society. How much money has been allocated toward homeless folks and the entire infrastructure trying to help these people? That costs a lot of money. And it costs money to replace roads and infrastructure. I don't get it. Where are we going to pay for all this stuff? There has to be a more serious introspection around some projects like the casino in Saanich. We'll see. We'll see what happens. If they say that they got to raise our taxes by 10%, that's a problem.
Well, we'll see if that happens. But, I think also the people of Saanich obviously had a chance to let council know how they felt. I'm sure they got lots of letters and lots of calls on that. This is democracy in action. At least it is not a council rushing ahead with something that maybe they don't necessarily have the buy-in in the community. So, you have to take that into consideration as well.
Yeah.
So we'll follow that. If it comes up again, we're always interested. And let's now, I think, move into our big topic of the morning, and that is music in schools, particularly in School District 61 in Victoria. And, there's a $7 million budget shortfall and lots of angry parents and students. They've been on the streets. I've seen protests. I've driven by several schools where there have been placards and students very upset about the situation.
Totally, yeah.
And so, I have to say a few things now about the Victoria School Board. They did come up with $500,000 that's going to go back into those programs. So the school board has acted to a degree. We'll hear more about other things they may do. It's not all back, but a lot of the strings and choir in middle schools and the music program in middle schools has been restored. So we may hear more about other things that can be done, but I want to quickly address the whole idea of cuts to various parts of the curriculum. Chair Jordan Waters and her fellow trustees are, I think, in a very tough spot. In many ways, COVID-19 has created this whole problem. It's really cut back on the overall budget in the community because there's a lot of money that comes from foreign students who come in and pay top dollar to go to our schools. Well, there's none of them this year. We closed our border. There's also a lot of revenue from renting out space in schools in off hours and weekends. Well, there's none of that. We're not supposed to assemble inside. So really, COVID has squeezed our education system. And, I know that a lot of these school trustees are as upset about this situation as the parents. People like Elaine Leonard and Tom Ferris. Now, I've known these trustees for decades, and I happen to know they're extremely dedicated to the education system in our schools. So it's terribly unfair to cast them as villains. I think they are doing the best they can under the situation, but I also think we need to look at new priorities. The arts in general, music in particular, should not be the first area we turn to for cuts when times get difficult. Students need to have a wide range of exposures in their education experience. And if Canada is to compete internationally in the future, we have to have the best education system in the world. It's our ace in the hole, and I believe this must always include the arts. It shouldn't be a battle in funding between arts and sports and academics. All of them are important. And that all brings us now to our first guest, Charlotte Harvey. Charlotte is a longtime music, drama, and choir teacher. She taught for over a decade in the Victoria School District 61, spent even more time teaching up in the Comox Valley, and later she and her husband David taught overseas for a decade. So they've worked in international schools, a wide range of experiences. And today she's retired, but still teaching music to elementary kids up in Comox. And great to have her on board. Let's zoom her in. And joining us now in the Victoria Rumble Room, all the way from beautiful Comox, British Columbia, is the one and only Charlotte Harvey. Charlotte, great to have you on the show.
Thank you very much, Rob, and lovely to speak with you.
And I should mention, Charlotte and I go way back, back over 30 years, and she still looks fantastic. I don't know how she does it. Must be the water up in Comox program, but nothing's been decided yet. And in cutting the music program, it seems rather drastic. Is music really that big an expense for a school district?
Yes, music is it's a large expense, but it's playing the long game for children. I mean, you've got to put in that sort of investment to get the kind of quality of life and education that music can provide for children. So, of course, it's an expense. Sports is an expense. PE is an expense. Academics, technology, but they all sit at the head table, and they're all vitally important for children's education. And it's something that we shouldn't question about not spending. It's especially in these very dark times that we live in with the global pandemic. What else is going to bring us through the light? What's going to connect us and make us human? It's the arts. The arts and music have always brought us together. And to cut it, especially at this very dark time when children and adults are suffering, feeling very disengaged, music can connect us and bring us all together. Why would you want? It's so counterproductive to shut out the light in these very dark times. That's one perspective.
That's fantastic. Charlotte, hi.
Hi.
I've not known you for 30 years. In
So,
fact, more like about 3 minutes. And already I'm just really supporting and encouraged by what you have to say. So you're the music, drama, and musical theater teacher and have been for years. You're always the most animated, the most excited, the most dramatic person that I ever remember at my schools. So great to talk to you. I cannot believe that music is what they choose. How about some of those crazy? Hey, I believe it or not, about 100 pounds ago, and many years ago, I was a good athlete. I participated in a ton of sports, and you know what? Some of those sports can go. Why don't they pick some of the crazy sports that are being funded by some of these schools? Music is like cutting food from for your life.
well, you bring up a couple of interesting points there. First of all, I think we did ourselves a disservice in the fine arts in the 90s when we were constantly trying to justify our authenticity and existence in the arts. You know, there was a real push towards saying music is science, music helps mathematics, music helps literacy. And I think by doing that, we ended up undervaluing ourselves and made ourselves vulnerable to be dismissed. But music, as far as I'm concerned, you know, people can say, oh, music helps math and science. I say, well, what has math and science done for the arts lately? We stand on our own feet, and we're at the head of the table, just like the rest of the academics. But you know, you bring up an interesting point, a radical thought, and this may be a visceral gut punch for some people, especially the people in administration and educational administration who tend to come from the PE and the gym world. Why not start selling up all the soccer fields and the football fields? And School District 61 could sell that to real estate developers. They could build all sorts of fancy condominiums and attract all the wealthy people that want to come here to Victoria.
You're crazy.
But guess what?
But
That's
yeah.
what's happening. It started under Thatcherism, under Margaret Thatcher. She started selling school soccer fields and football fields. And as a result of that, the British presence in the Premier League has diminished considerably, and there's lots of research and statistics on that. And when that land is gone, it's gone. It's a travesty, but it's no less of a travesty. It's no less of a sucker punch than the thought for a musician to be selling off musical instruments, closing band rooms, closing theaters, closing art rooms. It's just as heinous as the thought of selling public assets such as soccer fields and football fields. Yes, it'll balance the books in a New York Minute, but what is it going to do for our children? So you'll end up with a generation of children who are physically unfit and can't carry a tune in a bucket. Not a good legacy.
Yeah,
Charlotte, I'm glad you've said it that way, because I mean, this is not an anti-sports show.
Not at all.
I used to cover sports. I love sports, and I wished I could have seen John Jurassic when he was in his prime, because I'm sure that would have been a sight to see. But you know, this isn't a suggestion that we think the sports programs should be diminished or eliminated. There has to be a better way to run a school district. There must be better ways to fund these things. And there must be ways that we can all participate as a community in ensuring that these things continue. Now, Charlotte, you and your husband, Dave, who I also have known for over 30 years, and I'm dropping his name because I know that's the only way he's going to watch this show. But you and Dave have taught in Victoria for years. You've taught overseas in places like Saudi Arabia and Korea and Central Europe. It's amazing where you've worked. How would you compare the situation in Canada, or maybe just the situation in BC, in terms of our access to music programs, our programs in general? How do we stack up with the rest of the world?
Well, most of the schools we taught in were international schools, so they were funded usually by like oil and big business. Some of the schools, it was like $40,000 a year to get a place in kindergarten. So there was a lot of money there, but there was also a tremendous expectation that the programs be as diverse as possible. So the sports were excellent, the music programs were out of this world, and it was just a cultural expectation. And of course, the students thrived. And they were very connected, and just really, it was an honor to teach those children. But yes, they were privileged, and then coming back here, it's been it's been a bit of an eye opener coming back here and seeing that when you've got public education, where are the priorities? And I really believe the priorities need to remain in the fine arts as well as sports, all sorts of extracurricular options for children. But as I said before, never before in time have children needed to feel connected, because they're really, really feeling disengaged right now.
It says something really about the role of culture in our society, and the importance and value that we place on it. And clearly, when somebody says we're cutting the music, they don't value culture. I happened in another life, in another hat, to working with a lot of our Indigenous peoples and trying to find ways to introduce workforce diversity into our regional employment environment, and understanding the massive importance and priority of culture in an Indigenous society is part of understanding who they are.
Yeah.
And I would like to think that we have some kind of equivalency.
Well, it really teaches you how to live. There was a classic line that we used to say is, of what value will it be to make a prosperous living unless you know how to live? And music teaches you to recognize beauty and harmony and connectivity in the world. And of course, most people, it's the same in sports. I mean, most kids are not going to go on to be in the NBA or be great soccer stars. Same in music. Most kids are not going to be, but they're going to become patrons of the art, and they're going to keep the art going for those people that choose to follow that journey in their hearts. And there's so many things that music and the art programs offer besides just music. It's especially when kids are making that transition from elementary school to high school, when they walk in that door in grade 8, if they've already had a planted seed, they've got a tribe, they've got a refuge, a haven. It's the band room, it's the drama room, it's the choir room. They've got a refuge place to go to. They're not going to shut down their middle school program, but they'll take away what they perceive to be a big, and in some people's mind, an unnecessary expense, and that's the music programs. But such counterproductive thinking. It's the very essence that keeps those kids connected, so that when they walk in that door in grade 9, and I was that student who walked into Argyle Secondary School quite terrified. but I knew I had a home, a tribe, a place, a refuge place where I could be who I was meant to be. And that's so important for so many children. And that goes for visual art, goes for theater. It sounds like it's, people roll their eyes and say, oh, I've heard this a million times. Guess what? It's true. A lot of kids would never have made it through school without music. And I'll say the same for sports. Yeah.
You've summarized the situation, Charlotte, wonderfully, and love your message, and we hope to help really broadcast it. Any final thoughts now here as we come to the end of our interview with you? And do you think actually music is going to survive in Victoria District 61?
Yes, I will, because it's not the first rodeo for the BC Coalition for Music. They've gone through this before.
Mm.
The dark times, but I think almost with the pandemic as kind of the nemesis in the background, I think that will propel people to move forward and to keep fighting. I was thinking, I'm 61 now. I'm getting so tired of fighting for the justification and the authenticity of the arts. But I look at the programs like, not that I would equate my fight or my struggle with Black Lives Matter or even the LGBTQ community, that they must be tired too of fighting and fighting to justify what is true and what is right and what is authentic. But music and the arts falls in that category too, that without it, we're an empty vessel as a society. And when you look back on ancient cultures, when you study them, ancient societies, you don't necessarily study their math and their science. You study their art, their music, their literature, their theater. And there's also a huge connection between the arts and democracy. It's no accident that the place of democracy, the origins was Greece, as is theater. And the arts and the democracy go hand in hand. If we want to keep our democracy alive, we need the arts to help us.
Again, many thanks to Charlotte Harvey. Wonderful perspective. Wonderful to hear a music teacher's perspective on this issue. And now we turn the opinion to the other side of the story, that being of a parent. And this particular person, whom I've known not for 3 minutes, but for almost 30 years in this instance, has 3 daughters who were heavily involved in the music programs in Victoria. Gregg Meiklejohn.
And it's great to have Gregg with us. He has 3 daughters, all sang, I believe, in the Vic High R&B band, which I believe has also faced a lot of cuts in its funding over the last couple of years. And Gregg is also a managing partner of the Victoria company called Enrollment Resources, which successfully helps schools, colleges, and universities with enrollment and budget issues. So Gregg has a lot of knowledge with school budgets and what could be done perhaps to help with programs in the future that may again face cuts.
And now joining us from across town, maybe across province, who knows, is Gregg Meiklejohn. Great to have you in the Rumble Room.
Thank you, guys.
Great to have you here, Gregg.
Thank you,
have
Robin.
three daughters who've all studied music in the Victoria school system. And I'm sure you must feel a lot of sympathy for what parents are going through right now when they see the programs threatened. And I know that it's maybe at the moment being dealt with in a certain way, but it doesn't seem like it's ever fully resolved.
Well, I believe they threw an olive branch out, and now the music programs have been brought back to 40% of their original budget, which is really pathetic when you get down to it. And I see these parents, these families trying to create a protests, and I harken back to my own kids and their journey, starting from when they were just at South Park. And yeah, I just kind of feel sad because it's opportunity and skills and camaraderie all kind of flushed.
Gregg, I'm a huge supporter of arts and culture,
Mm-hmm.
and feel that it's an integral, mission critical component of a civil society, and that we must emphasize arts and culture in education. So tell me from your perspective, what have been the benefits to your daughters in studying music And do you agree with me? Well, obviously, I think you do, but do arts and culture play an important role in a good education?
Yeah, yes, and for reasons that maybe people may not fully appreciate. Like in my business, my software company, we use a system called the Path of Least Resistance, which was a PhD, Robert Fritz, who developed. He took the thinking processes used in creating art and music, and created a format so people could use it to achieve goals in business and in life. And so there is a in addition to how we feel when we see a beautiful piece of art or listen to some amazing music, there's actually transference of skills. There's the value of creativity, right? You have like you take theoretical mass properties that are in the brain that are kind of unorganized, and you move them to a presentation, and then you can reflect back and see what you've created. Robin has exceptional art skills. He made a little painting for us.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at it and went, wow, this is really cool. And it kind of, so there's we all have creativity in us, and to unlock it, it adds another layer of value. Teamwork in terms of music, I think, is huge. How to fail and succeed together as a group, how to give concerts and get positive feedback, how to work with your teammates and have all your instrumentation on tone, and all these things create a warm emotional feeling for just coming together. It's magical. And then there's the science part of it, which I can get into later if you want, called the Mozart effect, where there's hard correlation of taking music in particular and how it has a direct correlation to STEM careers. So, yeah, Robin, do you want me to touch on that for a moment?
Well, if you want to, you brought it up, go ahead.
I'd love to hear about that. That's great.
So there's deep science. If people go on Google and start reading research, and this is what we did back in the day, was we learned that there is two terms. There's called spatial temporal skills and language analytic skills, and they get greatly enhanced in doing music or singing or choir or what have you. And the byproduct, the beauty of it is it develops in the parts of your brain that are also use these same skills for mostly math and logical thinking. So what that all means is that people, mostly children, who get a handle on those skills or those parts of the development within their brain, have a leg up when it comes time to study science and math and computer science, anything logical. So music is math.
On the other hand, it's also the arts, and it's creative, and it allows your brain to move into areas it wouldn't normally do in a school context. And Gregg, your daughters, they all performed, I believe, in the R&B band at Vic High. Is that correct?
Two of them did. One of them spun off and became an adept photographer, which then got her into Concordia and applied communications, which then got her over to the United Nations in Africa. And now she's housed at UBC getting a master's in journalism.
Which is to the point that really music is just part of the overall umbrella of the arts. And as we were saying earlier in the show, it's not a competition. It's not like there shouldn't be sports. There should only be arts, or there should only be academics. I mean, it shouldn't be a competition. All these things have value. You're a former sports guy. I mean, I know you played rugby and soccer and still do, even as an older athlete. But I mean, it's important that we're well-rounded. And I think that's the best thing about schools and even universities. I mean, universities mean universal. It's supposed to be a wide-ranging education, and it's great if they can get started early in a school setting.
Yeah, I'll speak to the stuff that's getting cut in particular, which is middle and elementary schools. I remember my kids They were at South Park. They had really extensive music, choir, and they really worked actively with the kids because they totally bought into the transference, how music in particular set them up successfully for uh, uh, doing more academic work. I mean, really, creative writing, English is an academic subject, but really it is kind of a version of music in the sense of
Mhm.
creative writing. And it's where copywriters come from in business,
Yeah.
So, so anyway, they moved into Central Middle School, and the music program there by Mr. Engstrom and Mrs. Eng, they ran this massive, like a third of the students were into something, whether it be strings or choir or, a band, or they had a little baby R&B band running, and they'd get 300-400 parents out, and it was a big connection with the school and pride and creativity. And they um, so out of that, both of my two younger daughters, when they were in grade 8 at Central, they got really hooked into music, and then they went over to Vic High and hung out in the rehearsal room as gangly grade 8 kids. And the 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 leader, the teacher there, Mr. MD, he said, "Well, go up and give it a try." So they got up and they sang, and they both got signed up as grade 8s in the senior high school Vic High
Oh, it's
R&B band.
fantastic.
And Mr. MD, his in addition to being a music teacher, he was a very active math teacher at Vic High. These kids, as an aside, they've been to Memphis, and they've been to Nashville, and they've been to Mississippi, and they've been to Denmark, and they performed at Tivoli Gardens. They've been all over.
It's a world renowned program, this Vic High R&B band.
They have mentors that had come in and worked with them. They did a bunch of recording at Sun Records and Royal Studios and Motown over the years.
Yeah, and that program's been cut.
That program's been cut, and then there's some cutting at the senior high level, but my understanding is it's mostly the middle school and the elementary schools, right, where it's getting chopped back. And that is back to, if you really wanted to have a debate with the people doing the cutting, you could make a very strong research supported argument that music, art, all have developed the brain at a formative age that will. Oh, I hear a dog.
Yep,
Yeah,
that's okay. All three of us have dogs. It's no problem.
John, I
he's
thought
not
that
a
was
critic,
your,
John. He's not a critic, Greg. Yeah.
no, John, I just thought that was your ex-spouse. So anyway, that the formative brain development, these kids get denied these ways to accentuate their skills. It sets them up for success in senior high school and beyond. And they're always talking about, as an example, women in STEM careers and what have you. Well, this is a pathway to develop the brain to succeed.
So
can I intersperse here just or interject? Greg, I did think that maybe you had a perspective on what the school board is facing in terms of the cuts from COVID. They haven't got foreign students this year. They aren't able to rent out space in off hours because people aren't supposed to be indoors during the COVID orders. So are there other ways that they could be funding these programs? I know this is something that you wrestle with a lot of schools across North America in terms of how they get their enrollment and also how they look after their budget. I mean, is there something different we could be looking at in the way we support our schools?
Yeah, it's a very difficult thing. The natural one would be like they're cutting choir programs as an example. But what you're doing with a choir program is you're cutting an employee. You're laying off teachers, and teachers have a teachers association, essentially a union. And on the surface, the easy thing to do would be Like Louise Rose, the famous jazz pianist, she would cycle through all the public schools and accentuate their skills. But if you had Louise Rose come in and run the Central Middle School choir without a teacher, then it becomes
A union issue.
correct. And so, I believe that people have the right to unions and organized labor. But if your question is where do you cut? Well, they can't. I don't think, for several reasons, the school board cannot cut, as an example, let's say the choir program, and then bring in a volunteer, Daniel Lapp or Louise Rose or whomever. There are loads and loads of talented people in town that could run as a volunteer a school choir. But do you think they will? I don't believe they would.
Or fundraisers, I guess there's situations where, I'm sure parents would love to run fundraising to support specific programs, but I guess there's also the argument against that in wealthier areas, they're going to have a much easier time fundraising than in areas where it's economically, I guess their people are more disadvantaged, and they don't want there to be an uneven playing field in Victoria or across the province.
I guess the brassy move in interesting times would be to have the PACs run GoFundMe campaigns to finance music teachers.
Well, thanks very much, Greg. Great to have him on the show. Get the parents' perspective, John. And I want to mention next week, we've got another great show coming up. We have a UVic expert on vaccines who's going to talk more about what we can expect in the future. Are we going to be getting vaccines for many years to come? We'll get some of that perspective. We're also going to be speaking to somebody who has had COVID-19. He and his wife have both had COVID-19 and a terrible experience. We're going to get a firsthand account of that from my brother, David, who we're going to be speaking to next week. And we're going to be finding out more about why you should get your vaccination.
That's going to be a great show. You know that I'm a little bit scared to have two Adaires on the show at once. So I'm going to have to prepare mentally for that. But I can't wait to hear about next week's show and interview those folks. But today was excellent. Passionate about arts and culture. I was fascinated to hear the link to math and science and the STEM subjects. So thank you, Greg. Now, you know what?
Oh, tell me.
This is where I want you.
Please tell me.
This is the most exciting part of the show, because this is where I'm going to tell you how you can share our show.
We got to get more people to share the show and like the show, John.
Totally, because we like it.
We like
Why
it.
does everyone else like it?
Well, please like me.
All right. So we have a website now, and that website is www.victoriarumbleroom.com. And of course, we have our YouTube site in which we have all of our videos, and that is Victoria Rumble Room with Robin and John. And we have a Facebook site, victoriarumbleroom.com, as well as a Twitter site. I mean, how many more of these do we need, Robin?
We're everywhere.
Victoria Rumble Room 1. So consider listening. We've had certainly an amazing response. I'm frankly a little startled. It's clearly your expertise and your comments, but I'm having a ton of fun, and I think others are. And so we welcome your input and your sharing and your comments. And of course, my name is John Jurisic.
And I'm Robin Adair, and rumble on.